Okay, it's December 14th, 2011. Don Bradford, this is your life. So tell me about your parents, where they're from, what they did.
Um, my dad was born in New Mexico, near Alamogordo. He was raised on a ranch, which is now part of White Sands Missile Range. The government took it over after he was grown and had left the ranch. Um, my mother was born and raised in South Texas, in the far McAllen, Brownsville area down there. And she still has all her family in that area.
Okay, what about your grandparents?
Grandparents, um, well, my dad's parents had the ranch in Alamogordo, and they came across actually in a covered wagon. We have a picture of it. Or not immigrated, but came from the East Coast, um, and came across in a covered wagon and bought the ranch, and built it into a functioning cattle ranch. And I'm not sure. My mom's folks, all her neck of the woods, there were Camerons and Ingrams and so forth down in that area, and they interacted. They had big orchards down there, raising when they developed it, raising grapefruits and oranges, things like that. They had a lot of dealings. Their family had a lot of dealings with Mexico, and actually had haciendas and some land down in Mexico, which uh, evidently over the years was taken back by the Mexican government, and and they were left with nothing. And then good times would come again, and they'd buy more land or get more land down there, and then they lose that to the government too. So
And that was mostly for farming.
uh, it was a ranching, I think, in Mexico in that area.
Do
But
you know any of your great grandparents, or
no,
okay?
really don't know anything about them.
Do you know where they came from?
Um, Mom's family, like I say, Camerons were one of the names, and I know they came from the Scotland area, and I think otherwise were just mutts from England, Scotland, uh, France. I don't know where. Just just white folks came over, many years ago and settled. I say Dad's folks primarily settled in the southern United States. There are records of them there, and then they moved west. Mom's folks were west in South Texas for many years. I think even before my dad's folks moved that way.
Now, what did your dad do?
My dad was
What first? When was he born?
he was born in 1919,
And
and
your
my
mom was
mom in
born.
1918.
Okay.
And they both, of course, were small town folks, yeah, and stayed primarily in the southwest area there. Um, my dad, at one point after high school, was a deputy sheriff down there, and then he went in the military. Mom went to nurses school and went into the military. She was a second lieutenant nurse and cared for her last assignment that I know of as a lieutenant. She was caring for prisoners of war down in South Texas at one of the internment camps they had set up,
World War II.
World War II. And Dad was an NCO in the war. He was infantry to start with, and I think he was a ranger at one point. He doesn't talk much about the war or anything, but I know he was over there, fighting. And he met Mom on a blind date, and then found out she was in the military and an officer. And of course, then he couldn't date her because you can't do that back then, especially. But they hit it off, so they ended up going together and ended up getting married, and so she had to resign her commission and just became a housewife. And over the years, she spent most of the time raising the kids, raising our family. But she also worked as a registered nurse. Almost everywhere we went, she would work as a nurse in the area too, at the military hospital.
Where was your dad a deputy sheriff?
Down in South Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So, where did you grow up?
I was an Army brat. My dad was in the military.
Where were you born?
I was born in South Carolina, and I was the oldest of the kids. But Mom and Dad lived in San Antonio, and then moved to South Carolina. Dad got transferred, so that I was born in South Carolina, but then they got transferred out of there. I was over there like 2 months, so I really don't know anything about it. As far as growing up or whatever. And then I had 2 brothers and 1 sister.
What were their names?
And my 2 years younger than myself was Doss, and then a year younger than him was Darlene. And they were born in, I think they were born in Texas. And then they adopted a little girl from Alaska in later life, but I was gone from home at that point. I was already old enough, I was gone, so I didn't know her very well.
So where do you remember living?
Primarily, I remember we were in Germany after the end of the war, and I can remember 2 or 3 of the places we lived in Germany, in Mannheim, Frankfurt, and Bavaria.
What year?
And this was in the late 40s. We were over there for like 4 years. So it was like 48 to 52 when we came back. And we had a house that they rented in Bavaria that we have a painting of on a wooden plaque that a traveling German painter that came around painted the house for us so we could see what it looked like. And it was a typical German chalet type place. And I remember that quite well because of the fun we had there. But we went back, Judy and I went back about 5 years ago and looked that house up and actually found the house and showed the people that lived in it then what it looked like, 50 years ago. And that was sort of neat.
What was your favorite place where you lived growing up?
Well, in Germany, it was in Bavaria. Like I say, I was born in 44, so I was 8 years old when he came back, or close to 8 years old when he came back. But Bavaria was so neat because there we're out in the country basically, and it was all mostly military around us, other military families, but the men would go in and do their stuff, and they would have to go in sometimes for quite a while, so everybody watched out for the other families. Well, we lived right across from a soccer field, and there was a stream on the other side, and I can remember that's where I learned to fish. Uh, and then we climbed the mountains, and I can remember playing with goats and with German kids. You know, the kids didn't have a problem, but that was a good time there. I remember I turned 6 there, and then I remember in Frankfurt we lived in a military housing unit, a big complex, I don't know, 8 or 9 stories tall probably, and it had the playground in the middle of the complex for the kids because it was in downtown Frankfurt. And I have vivid memories there of coming home from school with the other American kids, and we would go in and have a war basically every day with the German kids, because when we were gone, they'd come in and take over the playground stuff, and they weren't supposed to be there, but nobody really did anything about it. And we would come in and have a battle with them, and basically fight every day to chase them off the equipment, so that we could use it or claim it or whatever. And I remember that. And the other thing I remember there was we had a German housekeeper there that introduced us to raw bacon sandwiches. And we would just take the bread and put ketchup on it, raw bacon on it, and that was our meal. Mom and Dad did not like that. And I remember arguing about that several times, but I do remember the arguments and the eating. So,
What was your dad like?
my dad was pretty strict. He was military, like I said. He came up through the ranks and became a warrant officer, probably in the mid-50s, and actually started working with missiles, and he became one of the few warrants that went around the American nations and the American locations working on Nike sites, the missile sites, checking them and making sure their warheads were okay and things like that. So he rose to the top of his field, if you will. But he was pretty much a disciplinarian. Didn't hurt us, but that's the way we were raised. And he also was quite religious, and he would preach wherever we were stationed. He'd end up in a little church that we call it, the group is called the Church of Christ, and they're fundamentalists, and he would end up preaching in a lot of those places.
What about your mom? What was she like?
Mom was softer than Dad was. They, of course, were raised in the time frame where you kept marriages and you worked at them. I don't recall them ever having problems. I don't know if I recognized what a problem was, during that time frame anyway. But, Dad brought in the bacon, and Mom supplemented it by working as a nurse wherever we were at. But she was a lot easier going than Dad was. And Dad's whole family was that way. They were all sort of uptight. Mom's family were all farmers or farmer type people. So they're all outgoing, down to the earth, ready to help each other or help anybody else anytime. We, as kids, we used to love to go visit Mom's folks whenever we could down in South Texas. We really didn't like to go visit Dad's folks because they're all so, like I say, uptight. You just never really felt comfortable around any of them.
So tell me about school for you.
You know, I went to, I don't know, probably a dozen different schools. I can remember when we came back to the state, the first place we were stationed was in Texarkana, Texas, Red River Arsenal. And we lived in a little town over in the Texas side called Hooks, Texas. And we lived within 300 yards of the school. And I remember going to that school, and then I remember the military schools. After that, I guess we went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, Sandia Base, and I went to elementary there, junior high, and first 2 years of high school there. Mom and Dad bought a house in South Albuquerque, and Dad was able to keep extended there. I remember one of the things they don't do anymore, when I was growing up, you said the Pledge of Allegiance every day in school, in elementary especially, I remember that. And you sang America the Beautiful. The other thing, and I think that was wonderful, we should be doing that now, we should be proud of our country. The other thing we did, you probably heard of savings bonds. Well, as kids, they had stamps, and you could buy savings stamps and put them in a book and build them up. And when your book got full, or you got enough books, whatever it was, you would trade these stamps for a United States savings bond, and you have your own savings bond. And I remember that was a real big deal when I was a kid.
Where'd you go to high school?
Went to high school in Albuquerque for 9th and 10th grades. 9th was actually junior high. And then went 1 year for a sophomore year in Albuquerque, South Albuquerque. And then we moved to Washington, just outside of Spokane, Fairchild Air Force Base. So I went for my junior and senior year at Medical Lake High School, let's say, probably 30 miles from Spokane, Washington.
So you get to Vietnam and you land.
So we landed Pleiku, and let's say the battalion we were going to at Camp Holloway did not know we were coming until our advance party got there. So in order to put us somewhere, they cleared a single lane road through the minefield on the south of the base, and they went out there with bulldozers and cleared us an area that we could set our tents up and make our camp. And then they put barbed wire and stuff around the outside of that to hopefully keep any NVA or whatever coming in. So we got there, and that we had an empty field that had just been plowed out. So we set up all our tents, and we lived in tents there for 9 months, about 9 months, I think. But we set our tents up, and then once our supplies got there, we were able to reinforce them with the wood we brought and stuff like that. But we spent the first 2 weeks, everybody, without officers and everybody, filling sandbags and building our revetments to protect ourselves from incoming fire from mortars or rifles or whatever. And one of the things I also remember, they dug real big trenches in the ground. Like every 20 yards, we had a trench that was like 5 feet deep that was dug. What are you doing this for? Well, we found out about a week after we got there, the monsoon rains came up. And it just, like somebody standing there pouring buckets of water. Well, these 5 foot deep trenches filled up immediately and were flowing like rivers. So, being good American boys, we took our inflatable mattresses that we were supposed to sleep on, and we rode these rivers all the way down. And you could run a long ways, but you had to get off before it went to the barbed wire. So you had to bail out before that. But other than that, it was a lot of fun.
So what was it like? So then you started flying troops in?
Yep, we had, I think, maybe the first new H model, they were called, of the Hueys that came in to Vietnam. Before then, they'd been using A's and D's to haul troops and supplies. And with the D model, which was the primary workhorse at that point, you could carry like 5 troops on it with their equipment. That's all, because you wouldn't lift anymore. With our H models, we could put 8 of them in without any problem, and still, if we had room, put more. So it was unbelievable the amount of change that we made with those H models. And eventually they got rid of all the A's and D's and replaced them with H's.
Did you get shot at all?
Yeah, you got shot at for regular, but not hit. Because you could be anywhere out there. We always flew either right on the trees, treetop height, and sometimes between them. You flew there, or you flew at 5,000 feet. Anywhere in between, people could see you from the ground, and you get shot at. If you're low, by the time anybody saw you shoot at you, you're already gone. And you couldn't tell where the noise was coming from, so you didn't know what direction the aircraft was coming.
Were you ever in great fear?
No, it scared maybe a couple of times, but not really. I mean, I was young and invulnerable. Plus, I was a great pilot, like everybody else. So what happened would happen to somebody else.
Now, did you see many of your friends get tied into drugs and things like that while they were over there?
No, this was 1967, May of 67, May of 68. There wasn't that much drug usage going on over there then by anybody. Some of the ground units that had access to some of it may have used it a little bit, but it really didn't matter that much. You didn't see it that much during that time frame. 67 and 8 and before then, you were over there to win a war. You fought the war. You planned on winning the war. You supported the South Vietnamese to help them win the war. Later, when we got into the 70s, you knew you weren't going to win a war. You knew it was all political crap. And you was over there biding your time, and your buddies were dying for nothing because they wouldn't let you fight the war. And so that's when the drugs and a lot of that kind of stuff happened. But back in 67 and 8, nobody did that kind of. Not to say there wasn't an occasional individual that would get marijuana or whatever, but alcohol, I guess, was pretty much ours, and always has been, especially aviation. But we used to carry pallets of beer and deliver them to the troops all the time, you know. They may have to drink them warm like the Aussies did, but at least they get beer occasionally.
So how many tours did you end up doing in Vietnam?
Ended up doing 2 of them. The first one was nothing but flying. I was a warrant officer. And the second tour,